President Trump now says the U.S. is going to resume sending arms shipments to Ukraine after a temporary pause. Trump announced this week that the U.S. would supply weapons to Ukraine via NATO. The Trump administration has also been attempting to negotiate a peace deal to end the war in Ukraine. That's come up short. Those negotiations hit a snag. Our European allies are finding other ways to try to hold Putin accountable. In fact, a few weeks ago, Ukraine and the Council of Europe launched a special tribunal for the crime of aggression against Ukraine. This is the world's first and only tribunal created specifically to prosecute something called the crime of aggression, which refers to the decision to use armed force against another country in violation of the UN Charter. While the International Criminal Court has jurisdiction over war crimes and crimes against humanity, the ICC has already issued an arrest warrant for Putin for war crimes. This tribunal is specifically authorized to prosecute the crime of aggression itself. It's so-called a leadership crime, when a country's leaders launch or plan a war. Think about it this way. War crimes can be committed by pretty much anyone involved in a war, regardless of their rank or position, but only people in high positions of power can start a war. In this case, that would be Vladimir Putin. And that's the gap that this tribunal is designed to fill.
Every war criminal must know there will be justice, and that includes Russia. And we are now boosting the legal work in a serious way. There is still a long way to go.
That was the Ukrainian President Zelensky on the day that the tribunal was established. And in the audience, listening to that speech, was the Russian opposition politician Vladimir Kara-Murza. Kara-Murza has been a long-time and vocal critic of the Putin regime. His opposition has put his life in danger several times. He was poisoned in 2015 and 2017. After the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, knowing the risks, he returned to Moscow and remained an outspoken critic. On April the 10th, 2022, he appeared on this very program and publicly condemned both President Putin and the war. Are you worried about speaking out against the Russian government and against this war and invasion from Russia?
We all know the price. We all know the cost. But we also know that there are millions of people in Russia who categorically oppose Putin regime and everything it's doing. I'm a Russian politician. Russia is my country. Russia is my home. And this is where I have to be.
Kara-Murza was arrested by Russian officials just one day after that. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison for so-called high treason. After spending 2.5 years in jail, he was released in an historic prisoner exchange orchestrated by the Biden administration in August of 2024. Despite everything the Kremlin has put him through, Kara-Murza is hopeful that Putin will eventually be held accountable. In a recent op-ed in the Washington Post, Kara-Murza says the creation of the special tribunal is of monumental importance for the future, not only of Ukraine and of Europe as a whole, but also of Russia itself, end quote. He argues that the main reason for the failure of Russia's democratic transition in the 1990s, a failure that led us to where we are today, including the war in Ukraine, was the lack of accountability for crimes committed by the Soviet Union. Kara-Murza says, quote, there will be another window of opportunity for political change in Russia, and this time it must not be squandered. Achieving real accountability for crimes committed by Putin's regime is essential if a post-Putin Russia is to become a functioning democracy and rejoin the international community. End quote. Vladimir Kara-Murza is here with me now. He's a contributing columnist at the Washington Post. He is, of course, a Russian opposition politician. Volodya, it is great to see you again. You're looking healthy, I have to say. That makes me smile.
Always good to be back on your program, Artie. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Vladimir Putin has already indicated he plans to ignore any international effort to hold him accountable for his actions. You've been clear that you do believe he will ultimately face justice. You've been an optimist about the future of Russia for a long time, including before you were arrested and jailed the last time. Tell me what gives you this faith that one day not only will Putin face justice, but Russia will actually be able to live up to its potential.
Well, first of all, I don't think we should pay much attention to what Mr. Putin is saying. Whether or not he's going to ignore these tribunals and these judicial mechanisms of accountability is irrelevant. Criminals are not usually asked for their opinion, whether they should be prosecuted or not. Look, we are now marking these days the 30th anniversary of the horrible, tragic events in Srebrenica during the Bosnian War in July of 1995. The massacre, the genocide of Muslim men and boys in that town by the Bosnian Serb forces. I don't think anybody at the time believed, or very few people did, that there would be real justice and real accountability. And yet today, both the main organizers of that genocide, Ratko Mladic, the Bosnian Serb commander, and former Bosnian Serb leader Radovan Karadzic, are serving a life sentence in Dutch prisons after being convicted by the International Tribunal on the former Yugoslavia. And of course, as we know very well, the main mastermind of the Balkan Wars, the so-called butcher of the Balkans, former Serbian dictator Slobodan Milosevic, ended his days at The Hague at the International Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia after being handed there by the new democratically elected government of Serbia after the Milosevic regime was overthrown in the year 2000. Look, all dictatorships fall, all authoritarian regimes fall, and Putin's regime will not be an exception. And what is very important, and I keep talking about it for, every time I get the opportunity, and we've talked about this on your program many times too, what is very important, that evil must be held accountable. As you just outlined, Ali, the main problem, the fundamental problem that led to the failure of Russia's democratic transition in the 1990s was the fact that evil was not held accountable, that people decided just to pretend it never happened, and all the horrendous crimes committed by the Soviet regime for decades and decades, both against our own people and against other countries, just was sort of, the page was sort of turned, and people say, why should we rate the past? It is going to be a witch hunt if we try to bring people accountable. Well, Vladimir Bukovsky, a legendary Soviet-era dissident who was one of those people who pushed for accountability, who pushed for a Nuremberg-style trial for the crimes committed by the communist regime, he looked back at those Kremlin officials at the time and said, well, you talk about witch hunts. If we don't do this, the witches are going to come back and start hunting us. And this is exactly what happened when, just 8 years after the collapse of the Soviet regime, a former KGB officer, Vladimir Putin, came to power and began doing everything that he's doing now. So this accountability, this justice and accountability for what is happening now in Ukraine, for what happened before in Chechnya, in Georgia, in Syria, for what Putin has been doing for years and years to Russian citizens. Let's not forget that the two main leaders of the Russian democratic opposition, Boris Nemtsov and Alexei Navalny, were murdered on personal orders of Vladimir Putin. Let's not forget that there are thousands and thousands of Russian citizens who are sitting in prisons as we speak for opposing this criminal war, for speaking out against Putin's dictatorship. All these crimes have to be accounted for, and all these people responsible for these crimes have to face justice and full accountability. This is the only true guarantee that this evil will never come back, because if evil is not publicly reflected upon, publicly accounted for, and publicly condemned, it is going to return, as Russia learned the hard way in the 1990s. We cannot afford to repeat this mistake. There will be another window of opportunity for political change in Russia. As we know from Russian history, and as you know, I am a historian by education, major political change in Russia, famously or notoriously, comes swiftly, suddenly, and unexpectedly. Both the Tsarist regime in the early 20th century and the communist regime at the end of the 20th century collapsed in 3 days. And I'm speaking literally, not a metaphor. This is the same way it's going to happen next time. None of us knows when or how
but
the
you want to be ready.
regime is going to exit the political stage. But we have to be ready. We don't just want to, we have to. This is our responsibility. And not just for our own country, but frankly for the whole of Europe and for the rest of the world. Because as I think everybody has been seeing very clearly in these last 3.5 years, what happens in Russia affects everybody. Russia is the largest country in Europe. Russia is the largest country in the world. When there is a government in Russia that disregards and violates the rights of its own people, it is not going to respect the borders of its neighbors. It is not going to respect the norms of international law. So the only way we can guarantee peace, stability, and security in Europe and in the world at large is with a democratic Russia.
So you told me something years ago that has stuck with me, not just with respect to Russia, but respect to the world. And you said, don't refer to the Russians. There are lots of Russians who would like democracy. There are a lot of Russians who would like good governance. There are a lot of Russians who'd like to see Vladimir Putin gone. This is the administration. Talk to me about those Russians. To change Russia will take pressure from the outside world and pressure from people like you and those who support you inside Russia.
Well, first of all, just to state very clearly, only Russian citizens can change Russia. Nobody's advocating for any kind of regime change from outside. It is our responsibility to change our own country. But as we know from the experience, from the history of the Cold War, it was very, very important that the international community at the time, the leaders of the free world, people like Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, stood very clearly in solidarity and in support with all those people behind the Iron Curtain who struggled for democracy, who struggled for freedom, who struggled for the liberation from this communist tyranny. And this support and this solidarity of the free world played a huge role in leading eventually to the fall of the Iron Curtain and to the liberation of hundreds of millions of people who used to suffer under communist tyranny. This solidarity and support is very important again today, but unfortunately, very often, we are seeing something the exact opposite. And, we are seeing some leaders of Western countries, and unfortunately this has included for the past few months the United States of America, that actually are trying to sort of appease and enable the regime of Vladimir Putin. We see all the international broadcasting, for example, that the United States of America has been leading for decades, being totally dismantled in the last few months. We're seeing programs of support for human rights and democracy assistance programs just completely destroyed. We're seeing the leaders of some Western countries, not just the US, but for example, Hungary and Slovakia, if we talk about the European Union, those two countries did not vote for the establishment of the special tribunal for the crime of aggression against Ukraine when that decision was passed at the Council of Europe. Thankfully, they do not require unanimity, only a qualified majority, which was there. But we see leaders of some Western countries once again talking about going back to business as usual with Vladimir Putin.
Right.
Essentially inviting us to resume these failed, disastrous, immoral, and damaging policies of enabling and appeasement. There should be none of this. We know from history, so many, many times in history, what this leads to. Such policies never leads to peace. Appeasement never leads to peace.
Right.
Appeasing an aggressor always leads to more wars, more blood, more suffering. And in my view, it is very, very important that the international community, the free world, the democratic world, stands in support and solidarity with those millions of people in Russia who reject this dictatorship, who reject Putin's regime, who are against this criminal war of aggression against Ukraine, and who want to see Russia become a normal, peaceful, civilized democracy. And again, a peaceful and democratic Russia is not just the best, but the only guarantee of long-lasting peace, stability, and security on the European continent. And that should be our common goal, and that should be what we should all be striving towards together.
Well, you've survived 2 attempts on your life and imprisonment by Russia, so I'm going to bet on you and your take on what the future may hold. My friend Vladimir Kara-Murza is a Russian opposition politician. He's a contributing columnist at The Washington Post and a great friend of our show. We'll be right back.